All right. So we're recording right now. Welcome to Mornings with Patty, and our this is our third time together, isn't it, Abby?
Oh my gosh, it is. You're right. It is.
It is our third time together. This is my friend Abby Havermann. We've been friends for years, and we support each other through our insanity and through our love and our successes. And we help, bring each other up. And you have this beautiful podcast called
The Intuition
Incubator. Say it by yourself.
Overcoming Fear with Abby.
Say it one more time and I won't interrupt.
The Intuition Incubator, Overcoming Fear with Abby. And Patty was my very first guest. It was a tremendous episode that I've gotten so much good feedback about. And the podcast got in the top 10% of all podcasts within 3 weeks. I've been having some amazing guests. You, not the least of them for sure.
Well, tell us about some of your guests and what the purpose of your
yeah, so it's really
is.
about, and we're gonna get into some of this today, but it's really about how we've become slaves to this part of our mind, this left hemisphere of our brain that is doing all of this thinking, and we tend to do a lot of cognitive offloading, and we're so obsessed with what we're thinking, we're losing track of our intuition. And one of the greatest things I heard, Patty, actually, was when I was at Teresa Bullard's conference that you organized. And the way that she put it, I thought was so beautiful. She said, we're getting smarter, but we're not getting any wiser. And literally that hit me like a ton of bricks. And when I put this podcast together, that's what I said. I said, this is an opportunity for us collectively to tap in to the power that's within, to our intuition, and to trade getting smarter for getting wiser, because all the information that we need is here. And
so good.
Yeah. And so I've had, in fact, today going live is Tim Shields. He ghost wrote Dr. Joe Dispenza's Supernatural. I've had Anthony Trucks. He hasn't come live yet. I had Craig Goldberg, who created the acoustic chair vibrator thing, this amazing meditation vibration cushion. And oh my God, it's unbelievable. I interviewed Mark Gober, who wrote The End to Upside Down Thinking. I just got, just when Patty and I were sitting here, Hamel Patel, who does the research for Dr. Joe at the events, just scheduled a time to meet to record as well. So there's just so many. And then plus a lot of business people, some of my clients, a lot of people that have leadership in business and have had, Richard Bach, he's not going to be on soon, but he's going to come on. He wrote all the books.
I know.
Richard Bach?
My video, I have one of my favorite quotes comes from him, from Illusions. And that is, here's a test to see if your mission in life is over. If you're still alive, it isn't. So our mission in life is, I love that book.
Sorry. Not Richard Bach, David Bach. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Other books, David Bach. Yeah, I do love Richard Bach too. David Bach wrote all the Get Rich books.
Okay.
Women Get Rich. He wrote several of them. Yeah.
All right.
Different, really cool guy.
Cool.
Anyway, that's a little bit better.
All right. And so Abby's been a psychotherapist. She's been a TEDx speaker. She is now a coach, and she helps people do all kinds of things, and a podcaster, apparently.
And a
really good podcaster. So what we're going to talk about today is that part of loving ourselves. And I'm going to start out with a story and how to love ourselves, of parts of us that we don't like, whether it is our hair, whether it's our emotional state, whatever it is. How do we love those parts that we don't like? And what happens when we don't, and what happens when we do? So for me, my big awareness was years ago. I attended a 12-step recovery meeting called Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. And I went in about 10 years ago. I walked into a room and I see this big tattooed guy, and he says, I participate in my own self-abuse. And I was like, and in that moment, I was so unaware. I mean, it was like at the edge of my consciousnness. Like, what I would do is every time I made a mistake, I would hit myself like this, mentally. And I'm like, I absolutely hate myself when I make mistakes. And I realized it's a program from decades, I've had a lot of practice at it. But when I became aware of it, I picked up this book that's part of ACA. It's called The Big Red Book. And in it, it talks about not only are we addicted to emotions, the chemicals in our body, but it also talks about how we have an inner critic. And I'm really aware of my internal mother critic, the critical inner mom. But you have a loving mom too, and I didn't have that. I wasn't aware that I had an inner, and I'm like, if I don't never experience, how do I do that? So it's been a real journey the last 10 years, learning how to love all those parts of myself. And then as I go through this journey, I realize that most of the stuff that I have in this crazy mind of mine, that can be crazy, all of us, they're patterns from our nervous system, from the reactions from our environment. And how do we go in there and calm ourselves down when we're really upset, when we have these repeated patterns that we learn from childhood? And those are the kinds of things I want to talk to you about and hear from you about. How do we love those parts of ourselves that we've hated, that we've learned to hate? Now, when we're 3 or 4 years old, we're not like that. But over decades, we learn to become a certain way. So, Abby, I'd love to hear your input.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it was shocking to find out how much I loathed myself. And I always talk about, especially as women, and Patty, I know you've had such a illustrious career and had like many really big jobs. And we pride ourselves, I think in our generations of being able to kind of kick ass and take names and in the work world in many ways, even if we're making mistakes and beating ourselves up behind the scenes, there's a part of us that knows how powerful we are and how good we are at what we do and all of that kind of stuff. And so to me, when I had I'm out in the world and I'm like, no, I like myself fine. Like I like myself fine. But when I really tapped in and listened to like, well, what are the things I'm saying to myself? What are the images that come through my mind when I make a mistake? Like I just like, oh my God, no, like those cringe. Cringe.
What was that finger to your head?
Like I just want to, just like shoot myself. Like I want to wipe myself out. Like just, that stuff was always present. I remember a therapist telling me like way back, he's like, it's like you want to snuff yourself out. And I was like, yeah, like those parts when I would make a mistake or would feel exposed in some way or would feel embarrassed or whatever the mind started saying about, oh my God, people are going to think you're so stupid, or I can't believe you said that. It's all the things that we look back on that you mentioned to somebody like, I don't even remember you said that. I didn't think anything of that at all, right? But I wanted to just wipe that out. And it was like, wow, like the degree to which my inner world is so nasty toward me was really a revelation. And I think it's so important first to kind of identify what are the things we say to ourselves. And people will say all the time, like, oh yeah, I say that to myself. Oh yeah, whatever. But no, you really need to like sit with it and be like, no, really, what are you saying to yourself? Like, think about that. Like, let's not joke about it. Let's not say, oh yeah, I told myself I was like, what are you saying to yourself? And one of the things you and I talked about, Patty, was why? Why should we do this? Why is it important that we really need to be getting very clear and very serious about the things that we say to ourselves? What are your thoughts about that?
So that's a good question. This is my experience. And that is, the experience is when I beat myself up, who am I being? When I'm beating myself up, I'm being a victim. I'm being really unkind to myself. And when I'm in that state of being unkind to myself, how am I going to be in the world? How am I showing up? I'm showing up scared. I'm showing up less than. I'm showing up unworthy. I'm showing up all of these things because I don't appreciate all of me. So when I get into that state, like when I make a mistake, I fear the worst. Like, and my body contracts, and all I want to do is apologize so somebody doesn't feel hurt. It's just like, and nobody wants to be around that kind of energy. I know it's really hard. But the other part to that too is when I find myself in that place of beating myself up and sorrow and regret, or if I am really angry and I let it spill out.
Mm.
What I've seen, especially over the last 10 years, is how people are mean to each other, how they feel threatened by each other, how I've been. And when people are mean to each other, then the world becomes more divided. So that's why I have a YouTube channel, is to find those unloving parts of us, like beating ourselves up,
Mm-hmm.
and stop emotionally vomiting on people when you don't even have you don't know what people are going through or why they're doing what they're doing. There's usually a reason, and there's ways to address it. So for me, that's kind of the answer. One of the things that Louise Haye talks about, and I say this for everybody, and that is, she says, you would you would take care of 90% of your problems if you just stop criticizing yourself. 90% of our problems.
Then why don't we do it? That sounds like a great idea. I want to get rid of 90% of my problems.
Yeah, because of our thinking, because all we're doing is sitting around making judgments about, oh, I shouldn't do this, or I shouldn't have done that, or could have done, and it's just not letting, in Al-Anon, they call it shooting on yourself, and we just need to stop shooting on ourselves. And I use words like could instead of should. I could have, like, I think I've told you, do you use your gym? And I said, no, I could use my gym. Well, see how much nicer it is?
It's so much nicer.
So it's not shaming, because to me, when you use the word should, whether it's on anybody or yourself, it's a shame mechanism.
Yeah. And, when I'm just positive intelligence is coming to me because I do use that modality sometimes. And anytime that we're in a negative emotion, it means we are being hijacked by one of our, quote, saboteurs, what positive intelligence calls your saboteurs. And it could be your hypervigilant saboteur. It could be the pleaser that wants to please everybody, whatever it is. But that shame mechanism, for me, I have this hyperachiever. So the shame will come in like, oh, you weren't productive today. You didn't do enough today, right? Like that's been a monster for me to overcome. And it's ridiculous and so self-important. Like, why? Why do I have to produce, right? That's the society that we're in. And I think it's so important to be able to just recognize those parts of ourselves and be okay with them because they are there. We all have personalities that were constructed around the fears that we had growing up or the fears from other lifetimes or whatever there were. We have these personality parts and they're not all pretty. So can we say oh, wow, my victim came out and I lashed out. And let me do in Al-Anon, right? We call it taking care of our side of the street. Let me see what I need to do to take care of this, right? Without any analysis of what anybody else has to do. But can I just take care of this so that my side of the street is clean? And the only way we can do that is if we're not shaming ourselves, if we're not beating ourselves up, if we're not catastrophizing whoever we were in that moment, but we're just oh, that was a really very human moment I had. I don't love that about myself. I don't love it, but it's part of me.
But we're talking about loving that part. So let's go a little bit deeper on that part. Yep. And I have been doing a lot of inner child work over these 10 years. And it's not easy because I was so shamed as a child. And what I do know is that over the last couple of years, I really have realized that I have a dysregulated nervous system, that I have this part of me that just reacts very easily to things around me. And I've spent the last year just trying to calm myself down, just being in presence, just being quiet, and then sitting with that little girl who feels so hurt. Sitting with her, and I find the sensation in my body. I find out where it is. I ask her how old she is when this feeling comes up. I sit with her and I love her. I said, that's okay. Yes, she was mean. I know she was mean. And she probably didn't mean it, but I know it hurts you right now. and just validating that part of me and acknowledging the part of me that needs so much attention, the part of me that needs so much love. And when I start learning how to do that, then I stop looking to the outside for people to validate me. I stop looking for love in all the wrong faces, as somebody says, right?
That's a good one. That's a good one.
It's a really good one. A friend of mine's written a book on that. Finding, and it's a practice. And I have, I've worked my whole career just working. For me to spend time with myself and loving those parts of myself has been really difficult. So finding your inner child and loving that little.
Yeah, I want to call out, Patty, because you and I talked about that. We want to really offer some tools, and you just like mentioned a bunch in a lump. And so I want to really call out some of the ones that you mentioned so that people.
Yeah. Okay.
So one really was observing, right? Like just being aware of what is the unloving thing that we're saying to ourselves, just being aware of it without judging it, without you should this, you shouldn't have done that, oh, whatever, but just being like that part was there and being an observation. The other thing that you called out was noticing it in your body. Where do you feel in your body? And you and I have talked a lot about, how important that is, because this is where memories land, right? Like we feel the emotions in our body, and our body remembers. The body always keeps the score. And so being able to locate it and sit with it. I know for me, and I recently I've shared this example because it's come up so often for me. Well, let me just call this out. So the feeling in the body. And then the other one that you mentioned was really the inner child type of thing, where you recognize, wow, this little gal, she needs so much attention. How painful it is, how painful that is to feel that insecure right now, or to feel that victimized right now. And let me just, take care of you, because the big girl me can handle this. Not needing to fix it, right? A lot of times people will say, like, I'll ask them, well, what's the most empathic thing you can say to yourself right now? And they'll say, oh, it's okay. You didn't mean it. And I always say, that's not empathy. That's not empathy. And we all know that we cannot talk ourselves out of feeling a certain way. If you and I call each other and say, this happens and blah, 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 and the other person says, well, you did the best you could, or you're great, you're awesome. Like, how many times have we all had friends say that to us, or try and say it to ourselves? It doesn't work. You have to locate it in your body. You've got to sit with it. You've got to love that part. And saying something empathic is not trying to make it go away or make it better. It's just being with. It's sitting with.
So give a description of empathy, because, there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. And I know that most people don't know how to empathize.
Yeah.
Most people don't. And so talk about that. What does it mean to be empathetic with yourself?
Yeah. Well, empathetic is, what's the difference between sympathy and empathy, right? Like, I did something wrong versus I am something wrong, right? Like, or is that the shame and guilt? I don't know. I can't remember. I used to know that. Anyway. Yeah. I mean, empathy, I think, is really, really tough. And to a person, when I talk to people about this, they have such a hard time coming up with something that's truly empathic, because what we do is we do everything with our mind, and we have an emotion that we don't like, and we try and talk ourselves out of it. I did something really bad. That was really stupid. No, it wasn't that stupid. It was okay. It wasn't that big a deal. Listen, I'm going to call Patty and find out if she thinks it's a big deal. Patty says it's not a big deal. She said it's not a big deal. Everybody says, my husband said it's not that big a deal. Like, that is just the mind's mishigas, what we say in Judaism. Being empathic with yourself is literally being an observance. My best understanding is it's literally being an observant of what you're experiencing. And sometimes it's just, that's really hard. And I think it's so difficult for people to just sit with an experience that someone's having rather than trying to make it better. And they don't even realize when they're trying to make it better. The smallest things, even when we tell ourselves, well, you know what? It's the difference between saying something and the energy with which you're saying it. because it doesn't matter what you say or do. It matters the energy with which you do it. So I can say, I did the best I could when my kids were growing up. I did the best I could. Or I could say, yeah, I did the best I could. And there's a very different energy with the second part, right? Maybe there's some sadness, or there's some remorse involved, or there's some, level of just loving myself around, gosh, you did the best you could. And, you wish it were better and you wish all the things, but you did the best you could. That's different than all the years I tried to tell myself, well, you did the best you could. You did the best you could.
Hear the energy and the difference in the energy. Years ago, I was doing a lot of imago therapy, and the process goes, you share your story, you share what's going on with you.
Harville Hendrix.
You mirror them, you validate them, and you empathize. And it was so fascinating at the workshops to see couples, not even able to mirror what they were going. It was like impossible. They could not even say exactly what their partner said, and so that was, if they couldn't do that, they could not empathize. And to me, empathy is putting yourself in the other person's shoes to experience how it must have felt, so that they know that you are on your side. And
even
so
if it's your own little girl or little guy's shoes.
Exactly. So when that little person shows up who's scared to death, I know how it hurt. It must have felt so hard. It felt like nobody cared about you. And then loving that part of me, that nobody cared about me, but I can care about me now.
Yeah. And you know what, Patty? It goes right back full circle to what you were saying, because dysregulated nervous systems. You cannot hear someone. You cannot hear the other person. You cannot hear that little person inside you if your nervous system is dysregulated, right? You have to first calm the brain and body down, which cannot be done by trying to tell yourself something.
Right. And so you're so right. So calming the nervous system down. So years ago, when I was with Dr. Joe in his community, and I was volunteering, I can't remember if you were there when I can't remember, but we had these exercises where we had to face our fears. We're 40 feet in the air, 100 feet in the air, going over buildings, walking along planks. But first we had to overcome our fear. And part of it was just calming the body down, and do that first. So if you're feeling like this, like I have spent most of my life, this dysregulated nervous system that I did not even know I had until recently, that all I have to do is just put my hand on my heart, sometimes on my stomach, close my eyes, and just breathe, and in 4 breaths and out 4 breaths until my body calms down. And then if I can get to that point, then I can move forward. But I know when I am in fear, when I'm in anxiety, when I am rushed, that I'm going to be making some stupid ass decisions and saying stupid ass shit. So it is my job to make sure that I am calm. And then when I am calm, I can get in there and I can love those parts of me. I can love that part of me that needs it, but I can't do it, like you said, from the amygdala, from the thinking mind that's like so scared all the time. And I think a lot of us are that way.
Yeah. And I think you bring up such a great point, because, what we teach in heart math is, and all of these things really is like, we can physiologically shift our brain and body. We can do that. And so it doesn't come from thinking something. It doesn't come from thought. But for example, this breath idea, right? And the in-breath is stimulating the sympathetic nervous system. The out-breath is stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system. So if you're really worked up, breathing into 4, maybe holding for 4 and then out to 6. If you elongate the exhale, you're activating the parasympathetic, which is the slow down. That's the rest and digest. The sympathetic is the gas pedal, right? And so, but the other thing we talk about in heart math that I think is so important, because I think for all of us that have these really dysregulated nervous systems and grew up that way, and I did too. I think I came out that way, really. But the mind gets going so fast, and the mind is so critical, and it's just beating. And so I would try and do these breath exercises. And then I'd be like, well, I don't have time for this. I got to move on. Right. And you just like, you move on and you check a box that you did that thing and it didn't work. So now you're going to move on and let your mind take over and start doing its thing, because that's what the mind likes to do. Right. And you really haven't changed. You haven't changed. And so what we say in Heart Math is you really have to have an I mean business attitude. And so this is where I always come back to: serenity is your only emergency. Like, I literally had a sponsor tell me that in Al-Anon. Your serenity is your only emergency. And I just loved it so much. I took it as my own tagline.
Wow.
And so taking that seriously and saying nothing happens until I regulate my nervous system. So my mind might be saying, it's not working, it's not working, it's not working. And I have to say, nope, I'm in business. I'm going to take control of this machine, this animal, this amygdala, and we are going to settle it down. Period. That's the first thing that's happening.
Awesome. So first of all, we become aware, right? We become aware that we're dysregulated, that we're upset, we're angry, whatever it is. And then whatever that part of us that's reacting, because that part of me, to me, if I'm reacting to something, it's something I don't like in myself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And you make such a good point, I think, because you and I have a similar personality around this, where, you know, we're fighters, right? Like, it's sort of like something gets stimulated, it's like, la, you know, we lash out. And then the lashing becomes something to blame ourselves over.
Yes. So Viktor Frankl, we talked about this before, has this really great saying, writing, and he says, in life there is a stimulus and a response, and there's a gap in that stimulus and response, and usually it's stimulus react, not stimulus response. So what I heard years ago, that when we have a reaction, it's as fast as a tornado in our body. Like, there is zero chance of getting into that break. So my method is I just keep my mouth shut.
Oh, yeah.
And see how hard that is.
It's so hard.
It is so hard. I've been practicing it since 91. I don't do a really good job, but when I'm triggered, I stop talking.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I don't want to emotionally vomit on somebody. I don't want to say something that I'm going to regret later. And then it will show on my face. And then what I will do is I will start trying to calm myself down in that moment. That's my gap. So stimulus, response, there's a gap. Find that gap just by keeping your mouth shut, and then going through the processes of observing, of holding space for myself, of not, of loving that part of me, having compassion for that part of me who doesn't know any better.
You know, I love what you said, Patty. And first of all, I don't know about you, but when I'm able to do that, I'm so proud of myself. It helps me love myself a little more. Like, weren't you a big girl? Didn't you do something really spectacular? And to me, like, that is what it's about, right? That's overcoming. But in what Gurdjieff calls that is external considering. When we're really doing it from a standpoint of, I'm going to hold in my negativity. I'm going to hold on to it. Not so I can, like, go over in my mind how I'm right and they're wrong and blah, blah, blah. But I'm just going to hold it so that it doesn't impact this other person. And I know, like, when we have friendships or long-term relationships where there's so much wounding, I've done a lot of damage in my life, a lot of damage, by letting that negativity come out and that victimhood come out, and needing to speak my piece and needing my thoughts to be known and validated and all of, oh my God, like, what a waste of energy and what an ugly part of myself.
That you get to love.
And I get to love because she really, really needed that. But now she doesn't need that anymore, right? She doesn't need that. She needs me to hold her when she shows up. But she doesn't need you to validate or whatever. But when she's in pain that you're not, I can hold her. Right. And so That's a practice. It's really a practice. And I feel like it's something that, and there's always things, right? There's lots of things that now we've done it for a while, it's easy. And then there's bigger challenges that it's like, oh, well, that part got out.
I also want to mention one thing about the cleaning side of the street, when that part got out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So for me, if I'm a little hyper vigilant just naturally on this. I've been trained to watch people. And if I say something and I watch their face and they're disappointed or they're hurt or I can see something happen and shifted in their energy, I will immediately make an apology.
I want to ask you a question about that. Yeah. I want to know, how do you know, for example, when you're cleaning your side of the street versus when it's the hypervigilant part that's worried that someone is upset about something and really it's your own fear?
That's a really good question. Well, when they're yelling at me, pretty much, or if I say something and I watch their head go down like this, or if somebody says, who has the courage, not the nerve, but the courage, which takes a lot of nerve. No, but really, it takes courage to go up and say, hey. But I'm going to tell you this one thing that really helps in relationships, which is a form of loving. And you can say it to yourself too. I'm sorry I hurt you. Mm-hmm. And it is the most, when somebody shows up and just says, I'm sorry I hurt you, watch their face. Watch them melt.
And again, that's with the correct energy, right?
Right.
Like how many times have we said, I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry you feel that way. Like
I would never say that.
Nothing, right?
I would never. That's your Gemini self coming out. This Piscean would never say, well, unless she was being really snarky with somebody that she didn't like. So.
Yeah. But yeah, if you really, really show up that way and you really feel sorrow in your heart and you don't need anything in return, man,
right.
That's something loving you can do for yourself.
Yes. I'm sorry I left you hanging like that with that. And the letter of amends to myself is a great way. Yeah. A great way to love myself.
I love that idea. Yeah. A whole letter.
Write yourself
a whole letter. I love that idea.
Yeah, I'm sorry I left you hanging in that relationship for so long when you were scared and I judged you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I let you go to your last dime before getting a job or whatever it is, or that I let you get in this relationship with a drug addict. Whatever that is, apologize. Yeah. Say, I'm really sorry because I didn't know any better. And when we start holding space for ourselves like that, when we start being more loving and gentle with ourselves, it makes sense then when we show up in the world, we're more gentle and kind and loving to others.
Yeah. Well, right, because anytime we're judging somebody else, we're really judging ourselves.
Yeah.
We're doing something in someone else that we don't like in ourselves. People don't like to hear that. I would never do that kind of thing. I would never. Oh, well, not really. That means you're doing it. Maybe not in the exact way, but in another form.
So this is a part. So let me ask you, like, how do you love that part of yourself, like part of your body? Like, how do you the part of your body that you don't like? How do you love that? The same way?
Do you mean where I'm feeling it in my body, or you mean
like
my literal body?
Your literal body.
Yeah.
Can you love those parts of you that you don't like about your body? Because women have such a image problem.
Yeah. What a great question. Yeah. I think a lot of it for me, it does start with the intellectual thought, like, this body has done a lot for me, right? I have a child with a disabled body. So I have the benefit of seeing that every day and being able to appreciate what my body can do. And to pick it apart right? And say, oh, there's cellulite here, or there's flab there, or to pick it apart like that. And I just think about it the way that I think about, who would a friend, like who would keep a friend around? Who would behave well toward a friend that is constantly picking it apart or saying it's not enough or it's this or it's that? Like, why would my body function for me or do what I need it to do if I am constantly criticizing it? And when I think about it from that way, I realize the importance of loving it and loving what it does for me. And the fact of the matter is, when I beat it up, it just makes me do all the things that make it look worse. Like lay around, eat all the things, all of that stuff, right? But when I can just appreciate and love it for everything it's doing and everything it is, and all the wisdom that's in every wrinkle, you know, um, I earned them. I earned every one of those wrinkles. I really did.
Bonnie Raitt said that. She told me, I heard her say that like 30 years ago. She says, I'm never going to have facial anything. I'm not going to have plastic surgery because it shows my wisdom. It shows,
Yeah.
and I don't need to change that.
Yeah.
And so I'm like one of the very few people I know my age who doesn't do anything to the face.
Yeah.
But anyway, because I want to accept it. And really, this is the bottom line about all of it as we talk about this. First of all, acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. Accept everything about me as I am. That's what it says in the big book of AA. Acceptance. And if I find something wrong with anybody, I am arguing with God.
Because I love that.
God. Yeah. And so acceptance is about, this is who I am. And everything that has happened in my life has happened for me and not to me. And if I can keep that mentality, that mantra, and in this moment I am safe, and I keep that mantra, and I just in deep appreciation for everything that's happened, because I would not be where I am today without every one of those other moments happening.
Right. Right.
So I can love myself. It's just sometimes it's a struggle. And one of the things we talked about earlier is like using other people to validate how I feel about myself, and how I will get upset if somebody's upset with me. That's my people pleasing, my need for approval. And that's where, when I see myself in those conditions, I need to love myself in those moments.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's our challenge.
That's the nutshell. And remembering that, that's why we're here. We're here on Earth School to overcome these parts of ourselves. And every time we have the same habitual reaction to the self-hatred or all of those kinds of things, we are keeping everything in place. And so
it's hard to grow.
It's hard to grow. It's hard to grow. Yeah. I mean, this is such a big topic. There's so much to be said on it, but I just, I love the nuggets that, that are coming out so far that, that people can really use.
So be conscious and aware of how we treat ourselves, our thoughts, who we are being, and be willing to be aware of what I like to ask people to do is review how you are with your family. As an observer from over here, how do you interact with them and how do they react to you?
Oh, I thought you were going to start saying what you think about how I react to my family.
No. No, I'm not going to go with it. And so you just go back and forth with that, right? And so you start observing, and is that who I want to be?
Yeah.
Do I want to be this person? So what do I have to change inside of me to become a more loving person? And is this thought loving or unloving? And so we go through that, and then we look at when these big things happen and we get all dysregulated, then we can learn we gave you tools on how to self-regulate.
Finding it in your body.
Yeah.
Right? Breathing into your body. Yep. Finding that spot. And the more you do this, the more places you'll find the phenomenon, right? Like I went for a walk the other day. I was sharing this in a group when I was speaking to some women. I went for a walk the other day, and when I see little toddlers, I became aware. I mean, toddlers, they're so cute, right? And what happened for me is I didn't realize this was happening, but it became into my awareness. When I see toddlers, I immediately am filled with guilt and remorse.
Wow.
Yeah, because I remember my oldest, what a little ball of love he was. He was just this little adorable thing, and I was very harsh. And I remember my youngest because his body was so perfect when he was a toddler. He had those little calves, just like little toddlers have, and those little hands, and there was no deformity, right? And so when I see a little toddler running around, I became aware there's a sensation in my body. And my go-to was to just kind of push it away, right? And now what I do is I just start tapping my heart, and I just find it in my body. I can feel it now. I just find it, and I just sit with that part of myself, that little girl that has so much remorse, that has so much sadness. Could she have done anything differently? Would she have done anything differently so that the kids didn't have the wounds that they have, right? Even though in a higher sense, I know that they're here, their souls are here for their own journeys, right? But my human body, as a mom, feels sadness and remorse, right? So can I love her and say, you know what? You really did do the best you could do. Even if it wasn't enough in your mind. It really was. It was the best. Right? That's different than saying, well, again, what I used to do, shove it down. Well, it's done. It's done. You did the best you could do. What are you going to do? Right? That's loving yourself. And why do we do that? Just look at the difference in the energy in that. Like,
for sure, you can feel the difference in the energy.
Everything changes in my world when I can just sit with her versus just trying to push her away. I can show up differently in my relationship with my kids, in my relationship with myself, my relationship with just about anybody.
Well, I'm hoping this is enough for people to helping them find those unloving parts of us and start loving ourselves. And the reason why we need to do that, because first of all, that energy feels amazing.
Yeah.
Compared to the shaming.
Yeah.
The discounting. And so I think we're on a really good path here. I think we're getting it. So it's inner child work, it's observation, it's awareness, and it's relaxing, not being hyper vigilant, noticing that when the system gets dysregulated, how to do that. So I'll write that up too, because I think all of those things are really good.
And also, Patty, the last thing that I know you and I do it constantly is taking in more information like this, right? So for my viewers, subscribe to this channel. For Patty's viewers, subscribe to my podcast, because we have people on it, and this is what we do. We are constantly taking in information to have a shift of perspective in
right. And perception.
And that's what I mean, perception.
Yeah. So we want to, because we talked about this earlier, we all come from different backgrounds, different cultures, different everything. And even though we come through all these different backgrounds, we're still only 1% separated from each other. So if we can become more loving, more kind, more generous, more of our hearts, and be present and stop going back to the past because it no longer exists. And we can't be in the future with anxiety because it's not here yet. All we have is now. Right. So let's make it the best now each and every time we can. And I learned something the other day that I'm playing with, just as an idea. Look around your house and look at the things that are in your house. They came from choices you made. This is your future from your past choices.
Interesting. I got to sit with that one.
Yeah, you created all of this from the choices, most of the choices that you made, like moving from Colorado to Florida.
Right.
That was a huge choice.
That was a huge choice.
Yeah, so all of our decisions come from the past, which create our future. So making the decision to love ourselves, making the decision to choose peace and serenity over fear and anxiety, over living in the past, gives us a much more beautiful future.
Amen.
Thank you for joining me today. And again, your podcast is Intuition Incubator.
The Intuition Incubator, Overcoming Fear.
And you can find that on Spotify and YouTube.
And Apple.
And Apple. And you can find Abby on at abbyhavermann.com.
Yep,
www.abbyhavermann.com
and Overcoming Fear with Abby on YouTube. But
so thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I'm hoping to chop these up and edit these into little bite-sized pieces for people to take in. And then okay, thank you. Thanks so much for joining us, all 2 or 3 of you, 500 of you that are showing up after the recording, and I appreciate your time so much, really.
Thanks, Patty.
And we'll do it again. Love you. Bye.